Hi, this is Wiz. Welcome to my channel. It has been exactly 6 months since I have collected my Audi e-tron S Sportback, and I thought this is the right time to do a 6-month review about this car. Let's get this done. So I have collected this car exactly on December 16th. I drove it for 6 months, I've done 7,000 kilometers, and I think I have now a pretty good idea about what I like about this car and what I dislike. Let's start first about the things I like, and the first one is an easy one. I like the shape of the e-tron S, especially in this Sportback execution. I said all over my videos that I'm not really an SUV person, but still I've decided to buy this one because I wanted to get that experience of driving my first SUV, and I wanted an Audi electric. And at the time where I did choose my car, the only offering that Audi had talking about EV was the e-tron in its SUV and Sportback execution. I did choose the Sportback over the standard SUV because I like the sleek design, especially the rear. And I think Audi have done a very good job on designing a sleek body over this chassis that, let's remember, it's based on the Q7. I love those arches lines on the rear and on the front as well. And something's particularly nice about the S version are those extended wheel arches. They are not a lot bigger compared to the standard 50 and 55 model, but they are still large enough to spot the difference. So considering that this is a 4.9 meters long car and quite wide, I think that Audi designer did a pretty good job on the body of the e-tron S Sportback. It looks very dynamic, very sporty, and very sleek. The second thing I like about my car, but this is more of a personal choice, is the paint. After a little hesitations, I decided to go with the Navarra blue, and I'm not regretting it. Especially under the sun, this color is really stunning. It has a lot of different reflections depending on during the day, depending on the sunlight. But I do love it. Gives a sporty look to the e-tron S, and combined with the black optic package, it gives really an aggressive look. I was hesitating taking the black optic package. I wanted for once, especially with the Navarra blue, to go with the original matte gray finishing, but again I'm not regretting going for the black optic package. After I took delivery of the car, I did change the front and rear logos with the black one, same as the side e-tron logo. I went from the standard chrome one to the black one. Front one as well. I also painted the standard wheels in black. So now I think this car has a coherent look. What do you think? Would you choose the Navarra blue, or would you go with a more gray, let's say Daytona gray, or black or white color? Let's move to the following things I love about this car, and it's the performances. So this is the S version. As a reminder, it has 503 horsepower in its boost mode, 973 Newton meters of torque, and it does the 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 4.5 seconds officially, but I've been able to get a consistent 4.2 seconds and even a 4.1 seconds once, measuring the 0 to 100 with my race box. Go! The e-tron S has a 3 motors layout, 2 in the back, 1 in the front, and that helps quite a lot with performances given the weight of this car. More on that later. Some things I also like about this car, and it's common with all the latest Audi, is the technology involved. You got sensor, radars, cameras everywhere. You got all the assistance features, provided you are willing to pay for it. Head-up display. You got cameras here under the virtual mirrors, and that gives you a 360 view of the car, and is really a nice feature, especially with a big car like the e-tron S. Whenever you have to maneuver or to park the car, being able to see it in 360 degrees on the screen gives you an advantage. The space inside the cabin is decent for this kind of car. You get plenty of room also in the back. There's no central tunnel. And also, talking about the cargo capabilities, never had any issues whatsoever. The trunk is quite big. A little limitation, given this is an EV, comes from the frunk. The front trunk is very limited, is not on par with what you get in a Tesla, for example. But this is again because the architecture of the e-tron Sportback and SUV comes from an ICE vehicle, which is the Audi Q7, and that's the reason why they did what they could. But talking about the frunk, this is the maximum space you can have. I got my charging cables here with these things. That is quite good if you have to carry them with you, but that's an option I paid for. So, if I have to summarize the positive aspects about the e-tron S Sportback that I have, I would say a very sleek design, very good performances given the weight of this car, and quite a lot of room. So let's talk now about the thing that I dislike on my e-tron S Sportback. The first thing that comes into my mind is the weight. This thing weighs 2.6 tons, which is enormous. It's for this reason that I call it my blue pachyderm. It is really heavy. And despite being quite dynamic, and I have to say it is surprisingly dynamic given the weight, you feel it whenever you drive the e-tron S on twisty roads. Don't get me wrong, it handles quite well, but still it's an SUV, and still it's a very heavy SUV. This car is developed using an existing chassis coming from the Audi Q7, and that's the reason why you get a lot of compromises in this car. If you choose to have a look at the latest e-tron offering from Audi, I'm talking about the e-tron GT and the Q4 e-tron, those cars have been developed being electrical vehicles from the ground up. So a little bit less compromises than on this one. Another things I dislike about my car is the energy consumption, and this is of course linked to the weight of the car. Let's have a look at my actual energy consumption. If we step into the cabin. So let's have a look now at the long-term energy consumption. So you can see over the last 4,800 kilometers I've done, my average energy consumption is 29.7 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. This is quite high, but I have to admit that I never really been careful driving the e-tron S. I don't drive it in efficient mode. Most of the time I'm on dynamic. Most of the time I floor it whenever I can, because I like this constant and instant acceleration you get from EV cars in general. So to be really honest, I have to say that I don't pay attention to my fuel consumption. Whenever the battery is drained, I just recharging overnight at home. So for me, this is not a concern. With the weight and the energy consumption comes also the very poor range of the e-tron S. This is something that I knew, but actually I didn't think it was that bad. If we take a look at my actual range, you can see that the car is charged at 78%, and yet I only get 233 kilometers of range. Again, if I have to be honest, the range is according to my driving style, and again, most of the time I'm on dynamic and I don't pay particular care about being efficient with my e-tron S. I just want to drive it dynamically. This is what a S model is meant for, right? So personally, the very poor range of the e-tron S isn't really an issue. The question you have to ask yourself is two questions actually. One, how many kilometers do you drive your car daily? And the second one is, are you able to charge your car at home? I am fortunate enough to have my own house and to have my recharging method at home, meaning that I'm charging my car overnight at reduced rate, and most of the time I don't drive 300 kilometers a day. So for me personally, it is a non-issue. Whenever the battery is empty, I just recharge it overnight. It takes 6 to 7 hours when the battery is down to, let's say, 10% to charge it up to 100%. And during this time I'm sleeping, so not an issue at all. Now, if you plan to do road trips, of course, you have to take into consideration that you don't get that much range in an EV car in general, and particularly into this e-tron S. So you need to plan accordingly. You need to find the super fast chargers, which I have to admit that Audi is still far away from Tesla and its superchargers infrastructures. So unless you have to do a road trip, no issues whatsoever if you can charge at home and if you don't drive more than 300 kilometers per day. Another thing I dislike, but this is a little bit minor, is the perceived quality. Let's not forget that this is a premium SUV that costs more than 100k Swiss franc. So there are some little bits, if you look closer, like the lower part of the door panel, like this visible bolt over here, and also if you look a little bit down you have some hard plastics. So I would say that in this category of premium cars, I'm not expecting this kind of things. I know that Dieselgate happened a few years ago to the Volkswagen Group, and I guess this is their way of reducing costs. I don't particularly like the steering wheel, but at the time I did configure my car. If you wanted to choose, like I did want the 3-spoke steering wheel, you couldn't have the driving assistant features for whatever reason. A couple of months later, Audi updated their 3-spoke steering wheel, and then you could have both. But when I did order my car, it wasn't possible, so I ended up taking this 4-spokes steering wheel. That is not the choice I would have made otherwise. I also had quite a lot of issues with the MMI. I had to replace the front camera because it started to be blurry at a certain point. So I went to the Audi dealership and they decided to replace it with a new one. I'm also having some connecting issues with CarPlay. It seems to work today, but let's say that 2 out of 10 times it won't connect to CarPlay. CarPlay is wireless in the Audi e-tron, and I've been told that this is a problem of whatever version of iOS you have on your iPhone with whatever version of the MMI. I got the latest version of both iOS and MMI, but still CarPlay won't connect once in a while. Otherwise, when it gets connected, it works very well and it is very smooth. I have documented all these issues on my Instagram, so if you are not following me yet, please do it and go to my saved story. There is a full set about the issues I had with my e-tron S Sportback. Also, I don't really like that they use so much gloss plastic finishing. It is a fingerprint magnet and it tends to scratch very, very easily. Yes, I'm flexing my Apple AirTags. Apple sheep. Oh, and I almost forgot some things that I like and dislike about my car, and it's those paddle shifters behind the steering wheel. Contrary to internal combustion cars, those are not for changing gears because there are no gears on the e-tron. Those are for selecting the level of regenerative brake you want to apply. What I don't like about it is that contrary to a Tesla, you don't have a 1-foot pedal driving into the e-tron, meaning that if you are not applying the brake, the car is gonna coast, which is not a bad thing, but I find myself constantly over speeding, because if you don't do anything, the car will gain speed. So you constantly have to play with the minus paddle shifter here to apply one of the 2 regenerative braking levels. If you don't do that, you end up gaining speed. I much prefer the way Tesla operates, where you modulate your speed just by releasing your foot on the accelerator. But the good side of it is that you get a kind of predictive braking, meaning that the e-tron, using the front camera and radars and the GPS data, is able to apply brakes whenever it feels that it is needed. Let's say you are approaching a roundabout, the car will start slowing by itself. It doesn't mean that you don't have to have control to the car. The car is not gonna completely stop. It's gonna start reducing the speed. You are still in full control. But the lazy part of me likes this kind of predicting braking. And finally, another things I dislike are the virtual mirrors. Of course, virtual mirrors are an option that I did choose to get into my car, so I'm partially responsible for it. But you know that I love tech, you know that I love screens, so the idea to have 2 more screens into the cabin of my e-tron S was very tempting, and that's the reason why I did choose this 1,500 Swiss franc option. Now, what I didn't really think about is that this being the first gen of virtual mirrors, they would be full of issues. The idea behind it is very cool and clever, replacing the very old and used from more than a century now rear view mirrors, glass mirrors, with a camera and a screen inside the cabin. But I have to admit that the execution is very poorly made. First of all, the screen placement. It took me quite a few weeks to stop looking outside and start looking on my door panel in order to see what's going on. So this is the first thing. And then second thing, being this a screen, you obviously get a flat image. So you don't get a real 3D representation of your surroundings, and this is quite disturbing, especially when you are maneuvering your car. So when you are driving and you need to quickly have a glance at what's going on your surrounding, you tend to look there, but instead you have to look here. It's more natural on the other side because they are almost on the same side, but on the driver's side you really have to force yourself to look down. I think a more natural position would have been somewhere here, and actually if you take a look at the Honda E, the screen is positioned somewhere here, and I think it is more logical. I also got some issues with the camera itself, especially during winters. The image would be blurry. I think this is an issue with the condensation, the difference of temperature on the inside of the camera as opposed to the outside with very cold weather. I've been told that this is something that Audi is looking for a solution, so probably there will be a recall at some time in the future, but I wonder why these virtual mirrors are not offered in the recent e-tron lineup. So should I configure my e-tron S Sportback again, I wouldn't choose the virtual mirrors. So there you go, that was my 6-month review of the Audi e-tron S Sportback. Would I recommend this car to you? Surprisingly, not really. Let me explain. If you are on the market to buy this kind of sized SUV, I would say consider the 55 variant. You get slightly less performances, but again, let's not forget this is an SUV, this is not a sport car. So do you really need to have that very fast acceleration? Do you really need that 4.5 seconds 0 to 100 kilometers an hour? If you don't care about it, the 55 may be a wiser choice, or even the 50, but then you have probably slightly less range than this S version. If you choose the 55, opposite, you'll get slightly more range. Now, if you think this is a little bit too big for you, you may consider now the brand new Q4 SUV and Sportback. Let's not forget this is a 12-month lease, so I'm supposed to give back this e-tron S in December. Let me know in the comments, what do you think should be my next car? Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe and activate the notification bell so you won't miss a thing. Also consider following me on Instagram if you want to know the latest and greatest news about Wiz. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye!